It's crazy to think, with all the amazing success that we've seen with the Steam Deck, that Valve actually used to have a home console that was one of the biggest failures in video game history. Just a few years before, in 2014. That is the Steam Machine. We're going to talk about that today. Why it failed, and how Valve learned their lesson from the Steam Machine to the Steam Deck. Obviously, the big difference is that one was a home console and the other was a handheld, so they're two completely different markets. It also worked entirely different because the Steam Deck was a dedicated hardware unit, while the Steam Machines was actually a group of different machines that a whole bunch of different companies were involved in. Obviously, the most notable one and most successful one, even though that's like in very heavy air quotes, the Alienware Alpha. That was the one that was mainly marketed and received the most amount of attention. It had an i3 processor that could barely run games at a competent frame rate and resolution, while being $150 more expensive than the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, or at least when Xbox decided not to force people to buy the Kinect and it went down to $400. Yeah, $150 more for a shitty i3 processor. And that was just the entry level one. You get the i5 and i7 processors for even more money, like up to like 600, 650. It's like, so you have this console though that's more expensive and ultimately can't really do much better than the PS4 and Xbox One, which were already established in the market, obviously, because Sony and Microsoft have been making consoles for like almost 20 years at that point. So that was one big thing going against it. I mean, the other Steam machines were there. They existed. I remember there was one that was like $2,000, $3,000, like just ridiculous price. The Steam machine failed to gain an identity because console gamers, they were already loyal to their respective brands, while PC gamers, they were going to keep building their PCs. There was no reason for a PC gamer to go over to the Steam machine, even though some of them were upgradable. It's just like, why don't you just upgrade your PC? So it's like, who was this console for? Like, at least with the Steam Deck, it's like, okay, you only really have the Nintendo Switch as the main handheld in the market. So Steam Deck being like an alternative, it makes sense how they could find their niche in the market, and it runs games pretty well. SteamOS, though, that's the thing. SteamOS in 2021, when the Steam Deck was launched, is very different compared to how SteamOS was in 2014 and 2015. The Steam machine didn't even last until 2016. It got discontinued pretty quickly, because during its initial release, SteamOS had fairly limited compatibility. Many games were not optimized for Linux, which was the backbone of SteamOS, causing compatibility issues with a considerable portion of the Steam library when using SteamOS on the Steam machine. So as a result, gamers were restricted in their choices and had limited access to their favorite titles, making the Alienware Alpha and other Steam machines less appealing compared to the other gaming platforms that had broader game support. So it's like, if you have less, like, so like you could run Windows, to be fair. Why? It's like, but the Steam machine was supposed to take the best of console, take the best of PC, the convenience of a console, which, you know, now is kind of a joke, but whatever, you know, the convenience of a console with the openness and customization of a PC. But it failed at both. PC and console did it better in both respects. So there was really like nothing to this platform at all. There was no reason to be excited for it. Between the high pricing, the limited compatibility of games, the game's not even running all that well if you bought the cheapest Steam machine, the Alienware Alpha with the i3 processor, which was still more expensive than the consoles. And the marketing also wasn't very good. I think Valve was better off. They should have just made their own console. There was one Steam machine, and that was it, instead of having all these different PC manufacturers involved and kind of confusing the whole thing. Like, they should have just stuck with their own console, kind of like how they had their dedicated unit with the Steam Deck, do the same thing, and actually have it price competitive. Because the thing is, the reason why the Steam machines were more expensive than the consoles is because they needed to sell the console, or whatever you want to call it, the Steam machine, had to be sold for a profit. Because you had a different company involved, they made the machine to make money off of it, but that's not really how the console market works. That's not how you have consoles that are brand new and cost only $400. Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo all sold their consoles at a loss and still do, because the hope is that, yes, they won't make money off of the actual console sale, but they will make a ton of money off of software sales, whether it's the PlayStation Store, Xbox Store, physical media, whatever. But with the Alienware Alpha and these other Steam Machine systems, no, they had to make money off of the actual console. So that's why the hardware was shit. Like, it didn't really run very good compared to the PS4 and Xbox One. The Xbox One and PS4 weren't even that impressive to begin with. So if you barely were able to outmatch those consoles, that's not a good sign. So yeah, I think, if they just went with the approach of Valve making one console, selling it for a loss in order to be price competitive with other consoles on the market, and also the Steam OS being a lot more developed, like it is right now. Steam Deck's compatibility with a lot of games is really, really good, but that's not how it was when the Steam machines were released. So if they just kept building up Steam OS, waited a little bit longer before doing like a console thing and creating hardware based off of Steam OS, 2015 was way too soon for them to do that, then I think the Steam machines actually may have played out a lot differently, especially in the modern age where you have Game Pass, Microsoft's releasing their games on PC anyway, Sony's releasing a lot of their games on PC. So why not just have an actual console that can run all of the Steam games? Technically, you have a much bigger game library than what you can have on a PlayStation or Xbox. You would even be able to play PlayStation exclusives if they were released on Steam. And I think if Valve actually had a successful console that was priced competitively with the PS5, the whole Sony putting their games on PC, that would end in an instant, guaranteed. And you would also have more backwards compatibility, essentially, because there's no such thing as a PC2 or a PC3 and this isn't compatible with this and that's not compatible with that. With SteamOS, you do have some problems still with some games that don't run properly on the Steam Deck, but you can install Windows and do all that stuff, which you could do with the Steam machine. But if you're trying to appeal to the console gamer that expects everything to work properly out of the box, not having to go through hoops in order to get stuff running, not having to dual boot Windows and all these things that aren't necessarily difficult, but a console gamer doesn't expect to have to do that if they're getting a console. So I think it's a much stronger situation now with SteamOS, though, where there's a lot of compatibility now that simply wasn't there in 2015. It's just, I think they honestly just marketed the Steam Deck a lot better, and people understood a lot better what the Steam Deck was for, what its purpose was, than the Steam machines. So I think, it makes a lot of sense why the two situations were a lot different for Valve, why the Steam machine was considered one of the biggest failures in video game history, and why the Steam Deck, at least in the modern age, is one of the most successful handheld devices. I think if you're familiar with the history of the 3DO and the failure of that console, there actually are a lot of parallels to draw between that and the Steam machine, in the sense that you didn't have the 3DO company wasn't making the consoles. They licensed the console out to other companies to develop. So you had Sanyo, they had their own 3DO, Panasonic had one, Gold Star. A couple other companies were going to get involved, but it was pretty apparent pretty quickly that this thing was going to go nowhere fast. I mean, they charged $600 for a console back in 1993, so that's even worse. That's like worth over $1,000 in today's money. Similar thing, though. They had to sell the console for a profit. That's why the console was so expensive. And yeah, so I think that I would have the price as the main thing going against it, and just the lack of cohesion. It wasn't one single platform. It was all these different things that, like, for a PC, it obviously works, but it's supposed to be a console. Like, why do the same approach with the Steam machine as you would with a regular PC, where you have all these different pre-built options? Like, no. The business model just doesn't work. Selling a console for a profit. It never worked, and it never will work. Could they try it again one day? Maybe. I wouldn't put it past them. I think, the Steam platform has evolved so much since 2015, and the console market has also changed significantly, where another competitor, especially from a well-established company, instead of like an upstart, could actually make a big mark in the console market, but they definitely would need to change their approach significantly from what they did with the original Steam machines. So what do you guys think? Do you think that Valve could try again with the home console market, just have a similar approach to the Steam Deck, but it just be like a home console version, and you think it'd sell a lot? You think it'd be successful? I think it could, but whether or not they'll actually try is a different story. I feel like they're comfortable right now with just being part of the handheld market. I think it's very clear, judging from the success of the Steam Deck, that Valve definitely learned their lessons from the Steam machine. So if they tried again, they would definitely do it a lot differently, and it could actually be successful this time around. Whether or not they're actually going to do it, though, I pretty much doubt that. I don't think they have any plans on making another console, but stranger things have happened in the video game industry, so who knows?